being led by the United States.
Alex, they're not strictly speaking devaluations, because a devaluation is what happens in a fixed exchange rate system, where the exchange rates are fixed, and then one day a government announces that it's devaluing its currency. What's happening is that the countries on pegs to the dollar, like the Chinese, their currency goes down with the dollar, as long as they're on that peg. And there are a number of countries that are on pegs with the dollar. I think, for example, the Saudi Arabian currency, for example, is pegged to the dollar. And there are others. And then you have the phenomenon that as people move away from the dollar into other currencies, those currencies rise. And so they're subject to a revaluation.
And that's what we're seeing with Mexico, with the peso now rising against the dollar, causing all these problems. So sir, boiling it down, and I understand, it's hard to tell exactly what's going to happen, but generally, historically, dealing with these types of economic systems, A, have we ever seen this type of bizarre configuration before? And B, where do you expect this to lead? Because, the media can say unemployment's 9.6, but you and others have said it's over 22. Even 60 Minutes says that, with their own analysis now. So that cat's more and more out of the bag. So, I mean, what I'm trying to say here is, just as a layman sitting here on a log watching this happen, I see everything I'm buying. I see food going up. I see taxes going up. I see education going up. Every indicator I've got, gold, silver, I see it going up. So, where are we going?
Well, there's excessive creation of dollars. There's no doubt about that. And it's putting a pressure on other currencies that are rising. And so what other governments do to keep their currencies from rising relative to the dollar is they sell their currencies and buy dollars, even though they don't want dollars. But they do that in order to keep their currencies from rising. Now, if the whole world is doing that, then the dollar is going to survive a lot longer. You see what I'm saying? If you're Switzerland, for example, and the Swiss franc is rising to the dollar. The other day, a dollar was only worth about 95 Swiss cents. It wasn't even worth 1 franc. Well, the Swiss say, how are we going to sell our machinery, our chocolate bars? And so their central bank goes into the market and sells Swiss francs in order to drive down the price. And then they buy dollars in order to support the price.
Well, there's no doubt then this was designed. And so where does it end? Because
no, I don't think it's designed at all. These are the reactions of other countries to the dollar's decline.
I know, but the Federal Reserve...
Alex,
go
let me explain. You asked me to explain it.
Go ahead.
So the net result is you have the whole world creating too much money, not just the United States. The Swiss then have to do it. The Mexicans will have to do it. So everybody starts creating money to prevent their own currency from rising. So you get a massive impact on prices from everywhere. Do you see what I'm saying?
No, I understand exactly what you're saying. Obviously, the Swiss aren't planning it. My point is, the Federal Reserve knows it's holding people hostage. I've seen the economists brag about the fact.
Alex, let me get on with this, because I don't know what the Federal Reserve knows. I'm not sure they know all that much. And I think what the Federal Reserve is doing, they're desperate. They don't know what to do. The economy doesn't go anywhere. No one in Washington, including the Federal Reserve, in my opinion, has figured out that you can't stimulate an economy with stimulus programs when all the good jobs are moved offshore. There's not a whole bunch of American factories standing idle waiting on spending to call the workers back to work. The factories are gone. And so the real dilemma the Fed has is that monetary and fiscal policy, with which they're familiar and have traditionally used, it doesn't work on an offshore economy. And so they don't know what to do. And so what they're trying to do is to cause a bit of inflation, because they believe in the Phillips curve that inflation brings about economic growth. It causes growth. So they're trying to be a bit inflationary. They're not sure what the effect will be on the dollar, and they are completely prepared, in my opinion, if the dollar starts going rapidly. They won't mind a slow process, but if it starts moving so rapidly that it is destabilizing, immediately, then they will announce the end of the program. Or they'll announce something else. And as long as people are listening to the Fed and going according to what the Fed says, they can continue this process of trial and error for some time. And I think that's what it is. I don't think it's a conspiracy on their part to destroy us, because it destroys their own power. They got nothing to gain. And certainly the United States government has nothing to gain from losing the dollar as the reserve currency. It's its main source of power. If the dollar wasn't the reserve currency, we couldn't possibly conduct these wars and interventions. And we use the supremacy of the dollar to intimidate other countries. So they're not trying to destroy the dollar, even though that is going to be the result, possibly, of their policies. So what are we faced with? When people look around, they look at the deficits, they see that the economy is not recovering, so that the deficit projections we've already been given, which are huge, are likely to be revised upward. They'll look worse, implying more deficits, more Fed buying of Treasury debt, more concern about the dollar and prices, and all of that will tend to drive the dollar down, gold and silver up. It also tends, as we said, to drive other currencies up, and then some governments try to offset that by inflating their own currency.
So where does this go down the road then? I mean, a slow process is their plan, or is what's happening, but can't this get out of control? Doesn't this in history normally get out of control?
Yes, it can get out of their hands. It can get out of their hands, but and this is something we have to be aware of. And I think this is why some people now are trying to have more people than usual. You see, if you look at people who are buying gold and silver now, they're not the traditional gold bugs, or whatever they call them. There are more people who are doing it. Just ordinary people are starting to want to do it. And so I think there is a general uneasiness everywhere about paper currencies. And I think even countries like Switzerland, which have always tried to maintain, a sound currency, because the government there represents the people at least as much as it represents the vested interests and the oligarchies. And so it tries to prevent inflation. But even the Swiss feel this pressure to inflate their own currency so that it doesn't rise so much, so fast to the dollar. And so if you find, even the Swiss pressured by this to inflate, you can see that the consequences could be a world inflation of a massive sort.
Doctor, we've got to go to break. I want to come back and continue along this line, and also want to get into the overall tyranny, your take on the elections we just had. These are incredible times we live in, and either way you slice it, things are going to get really rough. We'll be right back.